The package arrived on a rainy Tuesday, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. My name was written across the front in his handwriting, the same careful script I had traced with my fingers so many nights when we were together. My hands shook as I carried it inside, because David had been dead for 2 weeks, and yet here was his presence, arriving at my doorstep as if death hadn't dared to silence him. I locked the door behind me and set the package on the kitchen table, staring at it as though it might breathe. I thought it might be clothes, or perhaps letters, maybe even one last photograph of us. But when I opened the wrapping, inside was a single object, a leather-bound journal, old but sturdy, the corners worn smooth as though he had carried it everywhere. My throat tightened. On the first page, his words, "To Anna. If you are reading this, it means I am gone. But it also means you deserve the truth." My pulse hammered. For years we had been together in stolen moments, in quiet hotel rooms, in the shelter of secrecy, because he was married to someone else. He had always promised he loved me more than her, more than anyone, but promises whispered in the dark have a way of sounding like lies when daylight comes. I flipped through the pages. Each one was his voice captured in ink. Memories of us, dates and places, words he hadn't dared to say aloud. He wrote of the first night he saw me, how he couldn't look away. He wrote of the times he lied to his wife, of the guilt that gnawed at him. And then, deeper in, the lines that made me stop breathing. I cannot leave this world pretending that my legacy belongs to those who never truly knew me. The house, the land, the money, it is meant for you, Anna. You, and only you, because you are the one who did not betray me. I dropped the journal as if it burned. The room felt smaller, the air too heavy. He had left everything to me? It was impossible. His wife, his children, his siblings, they were alive, loud, and territorial. They would never accept this. They didn't even know I existed. Or if they suspected, they pretended not to. My hands trembled as I picked the journal up again, scanning more feverishly now. He had detailed everything. Bank accounts, safe deposit boxes, even the location of the second will he had signed in secret. Every line was proof that he had wanted me to have what he considered his true inheritance. My heart twisted between grief and terror. Loving him in secret had been one thing. Taking his entire estate was another. I could almost hear the outrage in his wife's voice, the venom in his daughter's eyes, the legal wars that would erupt like fire. A knock on the door startled me so violently I nearly screamed. I shoved the journal into the drawer of the table and wiped my hands on my jeans before opening. It was Mrs. Carter from across the hall, holding her dog's leash. She smiled, asked how I was holding up after losing such a good neighbor. I nodded and murmured thanks, but all I could think was whether she had seen the package arrive, whether anyone knew that I had just received a confession that could destroy a family. When she left, I closed the door and leaned against it, the journal's weight pulling at me like gravity from across the room. I read late into the night. His words blurred, but the message remained sharp. They will fight you. They will say you are nothing. But this book is proof. Don't let them erase you like they erased me. I thought of his wife, Elizabeth, a woman with steel in her spine and ice in her gaze. I had seen her once, from a distance, the day David insisted we couldn't walk into town together. She looked like the kind of woman who would kill with a smile rather than lose face. His children, too, grown and greedy, would never let go of the wealth they had been raised to believe was theirs. Yet David's words filled me with a strange fire. For years I had been the secret, the hidden one, the woman who waited in shadows. And now, in his death, he was asking me to step into the light, to claim what he believed was rightfully mine. But claiming it meant war. Near midnight, I heard something outside my door. Soft voices, a shuffle of footsteps, then silence. My heart raced as I crept to the peephole, but the hallway was empty. Still, I could not shake the feeling of being watched. Had Elizabeth already guessed? Had one of his children followed the trail? I clutched the journal to my chest as though it were a shield. Somewhere between grief and fear, anger began to spark. For years I had given him everything, my love, my loyalty, my silence. And in the end, this journal was the only proof that I mattered. If they wanted a fight, I thought, maybe I was finally ready to give them one. 2 days later, the storm began. It wasn't thunder or rain this time, but Elizabeth Carter herself, standing at my door with eyes that could cut glass. She didn't bother with politeness. only shoved past me into my small apartment as if she owned it. She looked around the room with thinly veiled disgust, her designer coat still dripping from the drizzle outside. "Anna," she said, her voice sharp as a blade. "We both know why I'm here." My throat went dry, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I don't know what you mean." Her laugh was cold, humorless. "Don't insult me. My husband left you something. I don't know how much you've seen or what lies he told you, but whatever you think you're owed, it's mine. His estate belongs to his family, not to some mistake." She said the word as though spitting poison, her eyes narrowing in triumph, expecting me to crumble. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I lied. "He never left me anything. You're imagining things." She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, expensive and suffocating. "If I find out you're hiding something, I will destroy you," she hissed, before storming out, the door slamming so hard the frame rattled. I collapsed onto the couch, trembling. Had someone told her about the package? Had she intercepted his lawyer's documents? Or was she simply guessing, trying to frighten me into surrender? The journal burned in its hiding place like contraband. That night, I drove to the storage unit David had mentioned in the pages. My hands shook as I unlocked it, half expecting Elizabeth or one of his children to leap out from the shadows. Inside, beneath a tarp, was a small safe. The code he had written in the journal worked, and when it clicked open, I gasped. Bundles of documents, deeds, account ledgers, even a second will, notarized and dated just months before his death. My knees nearly buckled. It was all true. He had left everything to me. But with truth came danger, because now I wasn't just the woman with a journal. I was the woman who could prove it. The next morning, the attacks began. Subtle at first, strangers lingering outside my building, my car tires slashed, anonymous calls that went dead when I answered. Then came the letter slid under my door in a plain envelope. "Give it up before it's too late." My heart raced as I clutched the paper, sweat slick on my palms. Fear tried to suffocate me, but David's words echoed in my mind. "Don't let them erase you." I called the lawyer listed in the will, a quiet man named Mr. Collins. He confirmed everything, his voice low and careful. "David trusted you. He wanted you protected. But you need to be prepared. The Carters will not take this lightly. They've already contested wills in the past. This could get dangerous." Dangerous. The word rang in my ears like a gunshot. I asked him if the will would hold in court, and he hesitated. "Legally, yes. But legally doesn't always win. Money, power, intimidation, they can tilt the balance." That night, as I walked home from his office, I caught sight of a car idling across the street. When I stopped, it stopped. When I moved, it crawled forward. My pulse pounded. I darted into a convenience store, pretending to browse, and when I stepped out again, the car was gone. Paranoia wrapped around me like a noose. Still, I couldn't stop reading the journal. David's words were both comfort and curse. He had known this would happen. "They will paint you as a liar, a thief, a homewrecker. But the truth is stronger than their hatred, if you can endure it." I wanted to believe him, but endurance is easier written than lived. Days blurred into restless nights, every sound outside my window making me flinch. One evening, I returned home to find my apartment door ajar. Panic shot through me. I pushed it open, heart in my throat. The drawers had been ransacked, papers scattered across the floor, cupboards left wide open. They had been searching for the journal. I tore through the chaos until I reached its hiding place under the loose floorboard. Still there. Relief nearly dropped me to my knees. But the message was clear. They were watching, waiting, willing to cross into my life to take what they wanted. And then came the call. Elizabeth's voice, smooth now, as though coated in honey but carrying the same venom beneath. "Anna," she said, "you don't have to suffer. Hand it over, and I'll make sure you're taken care of. Money, comfort, even protection. Or keep playing brave, and I can't promise what might happen next." My hand trembled around the phone. I wanted to scream, to tell her she couldn't scare me, but the truth was she already had. Still, something inside me hardened. "It was his choice," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "Not yours. His choice." Silence on the other end. Then a slow, chilling laugh before the line went dead. I sank to the floor, clutching the phone, realizing there was no middle ground anymore. Elizabeth wouldn't stop. Neither would her children. And now, with the will and the journal, I had enough to win, or enough to destroy myself. The question that gnawed at me was whether David's gift was love or a curse. He had given me his heart in life, his fortune in death, and in doing so had thrown me into a war I never asked to fight. But as fear warred with fury, a single thought anchored me. If I surrendered now, I would vanish, erased from his story as though I had never existed. And that, I realized, was worse than any threat Elizabeth could make. The break-in should have broken me, but instead it lit something fierce inside. I wasn't going to live like prey, always peering through curtains and jumping at shadows. Still, the silence of my apartment pressed on me like a tomb, and I realized I couldn't do this alone. That realization came with an unexpected knock at my door 3 days later. When I opened it, a young man stood there, nervous, shifting from foot to foot. He looked nothing like the Carters, disheveled hair, worn jacket, eyes that carried too much weight for someone barely in his 20s. "Are you Anna?" he asked, his voice tight. My chest stiffened. "Who's asking?" He glanced down the hall, then back at me. "My name's Matthew. I'm David's son." The word struck like a blow. His son. I repeated, suspicion slicing through me. "You mean one of Elizabeth's children?" He shook his head quickly. "No, not hers. Not theirs. His other son." My hands gripped the doorframe. Could it be true? A third branch of the family tree, hidden all this time? "Prove it," I said, my voice sharper than I felt. He pulled out an envelope from his jacket. Inside was a letter, aged and creased. It was in David's handwriting, the same looping scrawl I'd memorized from the journal. "For my son Matthew. Someday, the truth will matter. Until then, stay in the shadows." My throat closed up. Why come to me now? He looked at me with a mixture of fear and desperation. "Because they know about me. Elizabeth's people. I think they're after both of us." My world tilted, the walls spinning. If he was telling the truth, the battle wasn't just mine anymore. It was his too. I let him in, my heart pounding. He told me fragments of his life. Raised by his mother far from the Carter mansion, supported secretly with money David funneled through discreet accounts. He had never met his father face to face, though letters and rare phone calls kept the connection alive. He always said one day everything would change, Matthew whispered. But now he's gone, and they'll do anything to make sure I disappear before I can claim what's mine. I stared at him, the truth of David's journal pounding in my ears. He had written about a shadow child, someone who lived in silence for protection. I had thought it metaphor. But now he stood in front of me, flesh and blood. For the first time, I wasn't alone. Yet this new revelation only deepened the danger. That night, we pored over the documents together. The second will didn't mention Matthew, only me. But David's journal suggested another set of papers existed, hidden somewhere else, papers that recognized Matthew as well. "If we find them," Matthew said, his eyes blazing, "we can both prove our place. They can't erase us both." The "we" struck me harder than I expected. I wasn't used to allies. For weeks I had been cornered, isolated, hunted. Now, with this young man, David's secret son, I felt the first flicker of strength return. But with strength came risk. 2 nights later, while Matthew slept on my couch, I sat with the journal again, tracing David's words. Buried within a confession about his failing marriage was a passage I hadn't paid attention to before. "The bank box will tell the rest. They will never think to look in her name." I froze. Could it mean Elizabeth? Or someone else entirely? I read it aloud softly, and Matthew stirred awake. "Bank box?" he mumbled. We looked at each other, the implication dawning. The next morning, we visited 6 banks, chasing shadows, until finally one yielded results. Under the name of Helen Carter, David's estranged sister who had died years ago, a safe deposit box was still active. My pulse hammered as the manager led us to the vault. Inside the small metal box were more papers, letters, deeds, and, most damning of all, a codicil to the will. Dated the same day as mine, it named Matthew as an heir. Equal heir. My hands shook as I passed it to him. Tears filled his eyes. "He didn't forget me," he whispered. "He wanted me recognized." But joy was short-lived. When we stepped out of the bank, a black car sat across the street, its engine running. My blood turned cold. Matthew gripped my arm. "They're watching." We hurried down the block, ducking into an alley, hearts pounding as the car followed, slow and deliberate. By the time we slipped into a crowded cafe, we knew. Our secret wasn't secret anymore. That evening, an email arrived from Mr. Collins, the lawyer. I need to see you both immediately. It's urgent. Both. He already knew about Matthew. We met him in his quiet office, its wood-paneled walls heavy with the scent of old books. He listened to everything we had uncovered, then leaned back, steepling his fingers. This changes everything. With Anna's will and Matthew's codicil, the estate is undeniably theirs. But Elizabeth won't accept this. She's too invested, too ruthless. She will escalate. My stomach twisted. Escalate how? His eyes darkened. Character assassination. Legal sabotage. And if that doesn't work, worse. His words landed like stones. Matthew leaned forward. So what do we do? Collins looked at us both, a rare flicker of sympathy in his eyes. You fight, but you must do it together. Divide, and she wins. Stand united, and you might just have a chance. For the first time, I felt the weight of choice pressing down, not just for myself, but for Matthew too. David had left us both pieces of his truth, but it came wrapped in barbed wire. To step forward meant war, and as we left the office that night, walking into the sharp wind, I realized the war had already begun. The storm didn't break all at once. It seeped in, inch by inch, until my life felt strangled. At first, it was whispers, neighbors suddenly cool, colleagues averting their eyes. Then came the headlines. Mistress invents false heir, gold digger targets family fortune. My picture, stolen from social media, splashed across blogs and tabloids. Matthew's too, his youth twisted into scandalous speculation. Elizabeth had unleashed her war machine, and she fought dirty. Each article cut deeper than the last, not because I cared about strangers' opinions, but because lies had a way of sticking. The Carter family's wealth bought not just lawyers, but voices, and those voices screamed louder than any truth I could offer. Within weeks, my employer suspended me, citing negative publicity. My landlord, suddenly nervous, hinted I might want to find somewhere quieter. Even friends avoided my calls. Elizabeth hadn't just attacked my claim. She attacked the ground beneath my feet. Matthew fared no better. He was followed, photographed, harassed. His part-time job evaporated after a quiet conversation with someone connected. One night, he burst into my apartment, fists clenched, eyes blazing with tears. They cornered me outside the cafe. Two men. Said if I keep this up, I'll end up like my father. I froze. What do you mean? His voice cracked. Dead. They said dead. Fear tightened its grip on me until I could barely breathe. I tried to reassure him, but the truth gnawed. Elizabeth wasn't bluffing. She had power, reach, and the cruelty to use both. We met with Collins again, desperate for strategy, but even he looked cornered. Legally, you have a case, he admitted, but the Carters will drag it out, bleed you dry. And with their influence, it may never reach a fair courtroom. If I push too hard, I'll lose my license. They've done it before. Matthew slammed his hand on the desk. So we just give up? Walk away? Collins' gaze slid to me, tired and heavy. Sometimes survival is victory. The words sickened me. Survival? David hadn't written his confessions, hadn't hidden documents in shadows, for us to simply survive. He had wanted us to stand. And yet, every day, I felt myself cracking. At night, I'd sit awake, listening to every creak in the building, waiting for the next intrusion, the next threat. Sleep became a stranger, food an afterthought. Even the journal, once a source of strength, now felt like a curse. Matthew tried to stay strong, but I saw the toll in his trembling hands, the dark crescents under his eyes. One evening, he whispered, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I should disappear. Without me, they'd leave you alone." I grabbed his arm so hard he winced. "Don't you dare. That's exactly what they want. You're not a ghost. You're his son, his legacy." My words rang hollow against the silence, but I clung to them like a lifeline. Then, the blow I hadn't anticipated, Collins withdrew. A curt letter arrived, citing irreconcilable differences in strategy. I knew the truth. Elizabeth had reached him. We were defenseless, naked before an enemy who thrived in shadows. The collapse wasn't just external, it was inside us too. One night, Matthew disappeared. Panic clawed through me when I found his bed empty, his jacket gone. Hours stretched into eternity until finally, near dawn, he stumbled back in, his face pale, his knuckles bloodied. "I went to them," he muttered. "I thought maybe if I begged." He broke off, his voice cracking. They laughed, said I was a mistake, and mistakes don't inherit. I held him as he shook, fury and grief tearing through both of us. They had broken him, and in breaking him, they nearly broke me too. I began to wonder if Collins was right. Maybe survival was enough. Maybe David's legacy was too heavy, too dangerous to carry. Yet even as despair pressed me into the floor, a fire flickered faintly. If Elizabeth wanted me silent, it was because she feared the noise I could make. That thought alone kept me from surrender. Still, we were cornered, our resources gone, our hope threadbare. When the eviction notice arrived, 3 weeks behind on rent, no job, no allies, it felt like the final nail. I sat on the floor among boxes of hastily packed belongings, staring at David's journal. Its pages blurred through my tears. You left me a war, I whispered to the ghost of the man I had loved. And I don't know if I can win it. But even in that broken moment, I knew one truth. Giving up would mean letting Elizabeth write the ending. And I wasn't ready to hand her the pen. The eviction forced us into a motel on the edge of town, its flickering neon sign casting a sickly glow across the cracked parking lot. It was here, in the claustrophobic hum of a room that smelled of stale smoke and despair, that we decided we had only one choice left. If we keep hiding, Matthew said, pacing like a caged animal, we've already lost. They'll crush us slowly. We have to take it to them. Publicly. My instinct screamed against it. To walk into Elizabeth's fortress was to walk into fire. But then I remembered David's words in the journal. The truth matters only when spoken aloud. Perhaps this was what he meant all along. Not secrecy, but exposure. Collins was gone, our safety stripped away. What remained but to turn their own weapon, reputation, against them? We'll go to the estate, I whispered. We'll confront her, in front of her family, her allies. Force her to look us in the eye. Matthew froze, then nodded, jaw clenched. Then we end this. The next morning, with documents tucked carefully in my bag, the journal, the second will, the codicil, we drove through sheets of rain toward the Carter mansion. Its iron gates loomed ahead like jaws, snapping shut the moment we passed through. The house rose from the hill, sprawling and cold, a monument to wealth and control. Elizabeth was waiting. She stood in the foyer, poised as ever in a tailored suit, diamonds catching the light like shards of ice. Her children flanked her, silent, watchful. Well, she said, voice dripping venom. The mistress and the bastard. How quaint. Matthew bristled, but I touched his arm. We're not here to trade insults. We're here to show you the truth. I pulled out the documents, spreading them on the polished oak table. David's journal, the signed will naming me, the codicil naming Matthew. For a flicker of a second, her mask cracked. Then she laughed, sharp and cruel. You think paper matters more than power? David was weak. His secrets died with him. No court will touch this. No press will believe it. I stepped closer, heart pounding. Then why are you afraid? Why send men to threaten us, smear us, destroy us? If these mean nothing, why try so hard to bury them? Silence fell heavy. For the first time, her children shifted uneasily, doubt flickering in their eyes. Matthew seized the moment. He was my father. He wrote to me, supported me, wanted me recognized. You can't erase me, Elizabeth. You can't erase us both. Elizabeth's gaze sharpened, cold steel meeting fire. You're nothing. Mistakes. Parasites. I built this family, and I will not let you infect it. My voice shook, but I forced it steady. No, David built it. And he chose us too. If you want to fight, fight in the open. Because this doesn't stay locked in your mansion. We'll take it to the press, to the courts, to anyone who will listen. For the first time, I saw true rage in her eyes. She slammed her hand on the table, rattling the crystal glasses. You dare challenge me in my house? Yes, I said. Because it's not just your house. It was his. And he left it to more than you. Matthew pulled out his phone, hitting record, his voice clear. Say what you just said again, Elizabeth. About mistakes. About parasites. Say it for everyone to hear. For a heartbeat, panic flashed across her face before the mask returned. But it was too late. Her children had heard. The servants lingering in the hall had heard. And the phone captured every word. Her empire, built on control, cracked. She lunged forward, but I held up the journal like a shield. You can't silence ghosts, I whispered. David's voice lives in these pages. and now in ours. For the first time, Elizabeth faltered, her confidence curdling into something raw, almost desperate. He was mine, she hissed. Mine to command, mine to bury. And you're thieves of the dead. The room seemed to tilt, everyone holding their breath. Then Matthew spoke, his tone quiet but unshakable. No, we're his legacy. The standoff stretched, seconds dragging like hours. Finally, Elizabeth straightened, her control snapping back. This isn't over, she spat. You think one recording, one pile of papers, can undo me? I'll bury you both so deep you'll wish you never crawled into his bed. But I saw it now, the fear behind her fury. We had drawn blood, shattered her untouchable facade. For the first time, Elizabeth Carter looked mortal. As Matthew and I turned to leave, rain lashing the windows, I felt the weight of our choice. We had set fire to her fortress. Whether it consumed her, or us, remained to be seen. The courtroom fell silent after the verdict was read, but the silence was not a relief. It was a vacuum that sucked all air and certainty from the room. Elena sat frozen, her hands clutching the wooden bench as if it might anchor her in the flood of emotions threatening to sweep her away. The judge's words rang in her ears like a hollow echo. The estate is lawfully hers. The family of Richard, the man who had once been her secret, her solace, her great love, sat stiff and pale on the opposite side. Their faces burned with bitterness, with the sting of a humiliation they had not anticipated. His widow glared at Elena, her eyes sharp enough to cut glass, while the children muttered among themselves, their voices tense and low, promises of vengeance whispered into the stale air. Elena wanted to rejoice, to feel vindicated, but she couldn't. Not fully. The victory felt poisoned. The diary that had brought her here lay heavy in her bag, its cracked leather spine pressing against her ribs like a reminder of every confession it contained. She thought of the nights Richard had written in it, pouring out his heart to pages no one else was supposed to see. Now those words had become evidence, tools, and weapons. And though they had given her the inheritance, they had also given her a burden she wasn't sure she could carry. When the gavel struck one final time, she stood slowly, her knees trembling. Outside the courthouse, the autumn air hit her face, cold and raw, carrying with it the sting of approaching rain. A crowd had gathered, reporters with flashing cameras, neighbors hungry for scandal, strangers curious about the woman who had overturned a legacy. Questions were thrown at her. Did you love him? Was it worth destroying a family? Are you proud of what you've done? She couldn't answer. She pushed past them, the diary pressed tight to her chest, as if shielding herself from their hunger. In the distance, she saw them again, Richard's widow and children huddled together, watching her. Their eyes didn't just accuse, they promised retribution. She knew they wouldn't let this end here. The money, the house, the legacy, these were not just possessions to them. They were identity, honor, bloodline. And she had stolen them, or so they believed. That night, alone in the mansion she had never expected to own, Elena wandered through rooms filled with Richard's scent and shadows. Every corner whispered of him, his laughter echoing down the hall, his presence still alive in the worn armchair, the faint trace of his cologne clinging to the curtains. She should have felt triumphant, but instead she felt like an intruder in a mausoleum. The walls seemed to watch her. The silence pressed down until she could hardly breathe. She sat by the fireplace, the diary on her lap, her fingers trembling as she opened it to the final entry. She had never dared to read it before, too afraid of what truths it might contain. But now she needed answers, closure, something more than the cold legality of a courtroom. The handwriting was weaker, shaky, as if written by a man who knew his time was running out. Elena, it began, and her breath caught at the sight of her name. If you're reading this, then you know what I could never tell the world. I loved you not in the shadows, but in the light of my soul. You are my true legacy, not the estate, not the fortune. If the world turns against you, know this, I chose you. That is the only truth that matters. The tears came without warning, hot and uncontrollable. She pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle the sobs, but they shook her anyway. He had loved her, beyond secrecy, beyond shame. Yet his words also felt like a curse, because now his family's hatred was fully hers to bear. She closed the diary and stared into the flames, wondering if love was ever meant to leave such wreckage behind. The days that followed blurred together. Lawyers finalizing transfers, banks releasing funds, strangers sending letters of admiration or disgust. Some called her courageous. Others called her a thief. And always, she felt the eyes of Richard's family upon her, watching from a distance, waiting for their moment. She began to dream of them at night, standing at the foot of her bed, silent and accusing, their faces pale as ghosts. One evening, as she walked through the garden, she found a note slipped under the back gate. No signature, only words written in bold, furious strokes. This isn't over. Blood doesn't lose to lies. Her heart raced, but she didn't show the note to anyone. Instead, she burned it in the fireplace, the flames devouring the letters until they vanished into smoke. Still, the message lingered. Perhaps this victory was only the beginning of another war. Yet as weeks turned into months, something within her shifted. The house that had felt like a mausoleum began to soften, to open. She filled it with fresh flowers, let light spill into the rooms, invited silence to transform from oppressive to peaceful. She read the diary again, not as evidence, but as love letters, and in them she found strength. She realized that what she had inherited was more than wealth. It was a choice, a chance to live boldly, even if it meant carrying the hatred of others. On a cold winter morning, she walked through the corridors, touching the walls gently, whispering into the emptiness, "I'm here. I'll keep your memory alive." Whether Richard's family ever forgave her or destroyed her, she couldn't predict. But she knew this. She would never return the legacy, because it wasn't theirs. It was his. And through him, it was hers.